Welcome to the Old Lady Hour with Lorrie and Sheryl. We're here today with our guest, Dr. Sam Popkin, and he has just written a book called Scenes Through the Narrow Window. So, is this available everywhere books are available?
Um, yes and no. It's available most locally here at Ernest and Hadley Booksellers,
Okay.
and you can order it online from any major bookseller. But the problem is that they've got um, a little bit of a release lag now, so that I think they will they will start to provide print copies of the paperback version in mid to late June. So it's coming up soon.
Okay, so get your orders in now. We like to promote things here. So this is what we're starting right out with a promotion.
Yeah. There's also, I mean, if it's appropriate, I can give you a web
Yeah,
address for
yeah,
where they.
we'll get the link. We'll put the link on our YouTube channel,
Oh, great.
and so we'll
Okay.
be able to see
Okay.
our. We're here with our producer Sheryl, who is silently taking notes here, and yeah, she will put all the links. So we're learning as we're going, but so far those have been working pretty well.
Good.
So
Well, thank you.
so we'll get right into this. So I did a little bit of background, but um, you study at Bowdoin College,
Yeah, they pronounce it Bowden.
Bowdoin. So well, it looks like
Everybody does that.
okay. So this is good. Now this is educational for us. We're
Hmm.
learning how to pronounce things.
I actually knew how to pronounce that one.
Oh, because it's in is it in Maine?
I think so.
Yeah, it's in
Okay, it's
Brunswick,
in
Maine.
Maine.
Hmm.
So and then you went to USC for studies, and then UCLA for a postdoctorate. And
Exactly right.
and so, how did you get to Tuscaloosa?
Well, it really was largely a decision that was made with my former wife, who had just finished getting a degree in business and business law at the University of Pittsburgh. We met in Pittsburgh, and she had family in Selma, and she used to summer, quote unquote, down here.
That is an unusual summer location.
Yeah, yeah. So I came to learn, but she had always had this sort of semi-romantic vision of coming back to the South, and it turns out that her best uh, vocational offer upon graduating from Pittsburgh came from UAB.
Ah,
So she um, wanted to do that. And I was starting to get a little tired of and complacent with my job at the VA in Pittsburgh. So it all sort of coalesced into a decision that we'd kind of take a radical right turn and come here.
and so here you are in Tuscaloosa,
Yeah,
and then you said you've been a therapist for 45 years,
that's true.
which is
Formally,
remarkable.
yeah.
Yeah, formerly you're retired now,
Hmm.
and so the one of our themes on the podcast is people who are doing new things at an older age. So the book that you wrote is, I'm assuming you haven't written a lot of books prior to this one. Was this a new?
It's yeah, it's
It's an
it's literally the only book that I've ever written.
okay. So it's like a new thing. It's a part memoir, part really. For me, I felt like it was a therapy psychological primer almost, and and I don't know if that was your intention, but that's kind of the way it seemed
It
to me.
wasn't it really wasn't designed to be that way, and it certainly wasn't organized, with a capital
Mm-hmm.
O in that
Mm-hmm.
same way. But the more feedback that I get about it, and the more that I come to know the book better with the distance of that feedback from others, the more I think that that's really quite true, that there's a lot of uh, density to it in terms of psychological understanding and issues that are raised in therapy, issues concerning uh, the appropriate use or the inappropriate use of psychotropic medications to treat conditions. And there's a lot of different things covered in a book that's only 88
Yeah,
pages.
it was very dense. That's what I thought. It was
Yeah, I
like
think that's right. I
it
think
was
it's a short read but
yeah.
it's dense.
It's
Yeah.
it. So I went back and had to go through some of it again because I think there were a lot of really important. Like each sentence had some weight. So, so everyone, it's so there wasn't not a lot of filler.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad to hear that
Yeah.
because that's been what other people have been telling me about it. And there were times when I thought that it was actually very free of fluff,
Yes, there's not a lot of fluff.
No.
But it's for a memoir too, I guess,
Mhm.
because your life's been devoted to helping people through therapy
That's
and
true.
everything. So that definitely comes across in the book. And there are some personal things, but and so I think let's just get to some of that that's in the book.
Okay.
And part of it is just the impetus to write it. And so tell us a little bit about why you decided it was time to write this kind of book or a
Sure.
book at all.
Sure. And I think that dovetails very nicely with you talking about what part of what you're trying to accomplish with your show in
Mm-hmm.
terms of it being a look at what people do with um, some aspect of the tail ends of our lives,
Mm-hmm.
and I count myself among them. Um, it Upon retirement, it wasn't even in my conscious mind that I was going to do anything other than try to find things to do to stay busy and you know uh, make new friends, especially because I had only lived in Tuscaloosa for a couple of years at that point. I came down here to get married.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and had
Which was
previously,
another change.
that was a big change. I mean, I've been a bachelor again or divorced person for several years, living in Homewood in a little bachelor pad, and so that it was it was a breakout of all sorts. It really wasn't until about 2 years post retirement that I started feeling really compelled to want to leave something of myself behind with, let's say, people that I thought might be interested or affected by it and
Mm-hmm.
benefit from it. And I initially started thinking that it would be really nice to write this with my children in mind. I have a son and a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the simple fact of the matter is that when I did some realistic appraisal of who my kids are and what they're likely to be interested in and what the likely interest level would be for them of an undertaking like this, as I've been saying around town, I decided I had to start considering a wider audience. And I don't mean to put them down. It's just that I really don't think that it's their cup of tea.
Well, and I think there's partly just like we are always thinking about what can we do for other people. I think that is for a lot of people, they're just oriented that way. And I would think, especially in your profession,
Yeah.
you're thinking about that. But sometimes we have to do things that we just like to do. Like,
Yeah.
so it's really like, and I wonder, in writing it, did you discover some things while you're writing
Discover things about.
about anything? Like, did it about yourself or just even the
Oh
practice?
yeah,
Yeah. So sometimes
yeah,
I feel like writing can help you find things that you didn't know you were looking
yeah, and I mean that's true to this day.
for.
And it's both exciting and a little frightening in some ways because the product, for all intents and purposes, is done.
Mm-hmm.
But the process of dealing with the reverberation and all the forms that it takes is, in a way, just kind of beginning.
Mm-hmm. Because when you're writing it, it's you're reading it, so that you're the audience. But now it's out there in the world, and
Yeah,
yeah.
and I'm getting feedback from other people, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of, it's mostly been very, very encouraging and heartwarming for me because the people that are talking to me are not people that are likely to give faint praise.
Right.
So if anybody's saying anything really negative about her, having a bad experience of the scenes in this book or the content or the process of the book or whatever, they're certainly not telling me to my face,
Well,
you know?
that's good.
which actually I think is all right.
It's
I
okay.
prefer it that way.
You have, this is later in the book. You have something that says, sometimes about the fear of change, and so we do talk, or that,
Hmm.
uh, and that changing is courageous. I like that phrase, and so I think that fits in with everything we're talking about. That there's courage in making a change, and particularly I can see, as you with aging, you can really literally get in a rut, um, and
Oh, sure.
and so you know, branching out, doing something new, something a little bit outside being comfortable. It's really, but it's good.
Yeah, and that's not been new terrain to me just by virtue of my having gotten somewhat older and retiring from my career. When I when I first started zooming in on what my specialty could and should be within the field of clinical psychology, I was very strongly influenced by some real pioneers in research and
Hmm.
clinical practice with older adults.
Okay.
So, um, despite what I say in the book about how my decision to go to the University of Southern California was based largely on a fight that I had in a restaurant with my mother about whether I should stay in Boston for a while longer and continue to enjoy myself or move ahead. Um, I was well aware that they had really good programs in the clinical psychology of aging and very, very primary players in that field at USC. They also had several of them at the University of Pennsylvania. Um, I got into both places, and I actually got a much better financial offer from UPenn. Um, but excuse me, not UPenn, it was Penn State University. Um, but I did choose LA because it was further from home, and at the time that seemed like a really good idea. So
Well, sometimes we do.
God help
We
me.
have to get away. So
Yeah, well,
whatever that
it's,
means.
I mean, I say in the book that it felt like a retaliation, but what I didn't say is that it probably was a short-lived and fairly feeble concept because everything worked out very well in its own way, including my relationship with my mom.
Which
So
is good. I mean, you start off the book saying you don't remember the first, was it 10 years of your life?
yeah, I have very little childhood memory for the first 10 to 12
And
years of my
so, I
life.
mean, I'm sure you've seen lots of, you know about trauma, of course. And so, do you feel like that was
I've come to realize
is
that I do, yeah.
that was a traumatic response just to block out?
Yeah, and I should say for our listeners, how many ever there will
That
be,
that the millions.
the millions of
We're in the
listeners. Well,
millions right now.
okay, now I'm getting really nervous. But I should say that, and this is a really good example of reverberations, after the fact of having done the writing and so on. But there are a lot of people doing work in the field of neuropsychology and what they're calling, the neuropsychology of executive functioning. And they're finding out an awful lot about the biological influences on all kinds of things and, childhood memory notwithstanding. So it's been pointed out to me by a few people that it's entirely possible that some degree of my childhood amnesia was based upon the impact of trauma on my neuropsychological development and functioning in ways that I had not really thought about it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that it makes it biologically difficult to be able to consolidate and retrieve those memories. So it's not all just in the realm of psychodynamics and Freudian-based repressed memories and such.
No, but that's actually your brain and your body protecting you in a way.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
all, I mean, all of it is mediated through the brain. So sure, it's going to play a pretty big role.
right. I mean, I have a sister who's adopted from Korea when she
Mm,
uh, arrived in the United States at age 6, and she spoke Korean, of course.
hmm.
Then um, she quickly learned English, and to this day cannot really speak Korean except for uh, when she's semi-conscious. And so I had an experience with her when she had some surgery and she was coming out from under the anesthesia and she was speaking fluent Korean.
Wow.
Wow.
which was really wild. Like, so it was there. She cannot retrieve it consciously.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so who knows what, and, I mean, she's also, she's a, fellow old lady now. So, we're having to go back and when everything was happening with her, it was maybe, not the most enlightened about, uh, how to, process her childhood.
Right.
But,
Right. I guess I'm saying in summary that the door to understanding that seems very wide open to
it,
me. And
yeah,
I mean, I have a colleague in Los Angeles that I had the pleasure of having lunch with after not seeing him for 40 years, just a couple of months ago, and he's a very renowned author, and his latest and what he thinks is going to be his last book is basically a primer on how to do neuropsychologically based executive functioning psychotherapy with people from the gamut of, adolescent kids suffering from neurosis to corporate executives. And I don't think that's something fanciful. I think we're going to be hearing more and more and more about that over the next decades.
and I think,
Those who make it.
yeah, if we get there. So, um, and so, yeah, you talked about being afraid, anxious, and insecure as a kid in the book, but at some point you must have, uh, kind of thrown that off. So, or do you still feel this way?
Um, well, certainly not to the extent that I felt it for the first 30 to 35 years of my life. Um, I really think, and I've given some thought to this since I wrote the book, that um, a big issue, an overarching issue for me in childhood was a lack of a consistent feeling of safety
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
by virtue of a lot of the other things that were going on.
Sure,
And uh, I think that's terribly, terribly rough on children.
it
It
is.
is on adults as well, but it's particularly traumatic for children because without that, you can't go through your day with any feeling other than I just wonder when it's going to hit the fan today,
Right.
or if it will hit the fan.
Well,
And
and
I think that was
yeah,
that was
a lot of curiosity, discovery that happens in childhood can't happen when you're just looking for a safe place.
right, right.
So,
But it's not all or none. There were some places and certain people with whom I felt safer than others.
mhm.
Um, I'm very specific, and I guess this is appropriate for a post Father's Day show that
Yeah.
that I was most fearful about my father's retaliation and anger and instability with regard to his orientation to me,
Yeah.
and it's had an overwhelming impact. Some of which I really only started to understand a few years ago.
Yeah. And so sometimes that understanding, can happen late for us. I feel like, um, but it's never too late to gain some understanding.
No, not in my opinion.
On a little bit lighter note,
Hmm.
um, and I think you said this to me, but I think it's also in the book about that you wanted to be famous. And so your choices for being famous for a musician, which does make sense, like or a psychologist. And I think it's funny to me because I'm like, did you know famous psychologists? To me, that wouldn't be the first thing I think of is famous.
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm not sure that I have an immediate answer to that. I certainly could have told you that it would have been really nice to play in a band, that's the caliber of like the Beatles
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
who were some of the other 70s
Well,
that I was listening to.
well,
Actually, Beach Boys, Grand Funk Railroad,
I just saw a
all those
documentary on
things.
Led Zeppelin, so you could have been,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, there's lots of readily available ideas on that, but I wasn't I wasn't running around um, saying to myself, I want to be the next Carl Jung
Okay.
or the next Sigmund Freud or the next Albert Bandura or any of those special people.
Okay, because I was thinking, this sounds funny. Is it Dr. Joyce Brothers? Was
Yeah,
Yeah, so I was thinking someone like that, someone like
right,
pop psychology
right,
back in wherever that was.
right.
Like, was it? She was on talk shows and things. So I was thinking,
Oh yeah,
I was thinking maybe you wanted to be like someone like that.
yeah,
Like, okay.
yeah. I mean, and if I were sexually more experienced and secure, I might have
Or
been going
Dr.
around
Ruth.
saying I wanted to be like Masters and Johnson or something.
Oh, okay. I
I
was
don't
like,
know.
or Dr. Ruth.
Yeah, or Dr. Ruth. Yeah. But that's a really good point. I think that the way I had it wired up at the time was, what am I good at and can I get renowned for it, was sort of
Okay.
the equation.
Okay.
I really like that question. That's funny.
Well, it's just to me, it was just like fame to me was more, especially as a kid. Yeah, like, oh, you can see a pop musician,
You're an
a,
athlete,
a
famous
film
athlete.
star,
Right,
but a psychologist, you're like,
right.
huh, okay.
Yeah. Well,
But anyway,
that was
so
really precocious.
we're hoping that you are on the path to fame right now. So, you might need to do like a call-in show or.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's, as you know, it has lessened considerably in importance to me, and I have some understanding about what was driving that. But I really have to say, in all honesty and humility, it was very important to me, as a kid.
And I wonder if there's something about feeling unstable, feeling unsafe, that fame would give you power, to
Hmm.
be more, to be, feel a little bit more safe.
Hmm.
Or, and I think, oh, that's just a wild guess there, but
No, I think there is power in it. And the other word that comes to mind for me is you get validation
yes, okay, that's right.
that maybe has never been at a level or depth to have you feeling genuinely more secure about yourself.
So you're okay.
Yeah.
Like, look, all these people love me, so I'm okay.
I mean, today in 2025, I would argue that those kinds of things are not really what cements self-esteem. The process is
Oh yeah,
considerably more complex than that,
yeah,
and not
absolutely.
dependent upon external kinds of factors.
Sure.
What you do inside.
So a little bit of what that was making me think of, and this is because I use Instagram quite a bit.
Hmm.
By the way, go ahead and follow here, Lorrie S. Lane on Instagram. But in any case, there are, I don't know if you've seen the large number of therapists on Instagram, and maybe I don't know if you've ever looked at them.
No, I haven't, but I'm also not really familiar with Instagram in the sense that I don't spend very much time there. It's usually the last thing I look at.
If you do and you look at one thing, then they all follow you. So that's just. But I was just kind of curious to see, and see how much. And if you haven't, it's okay. It's kind of like wondering how that changes, even a individual practice.
Well, that's great because now that the book is done, I've been looking for more things to do, so maybe I'll get more familiar with that.
Yeah, I think that might be it's interesting phenomenon because or anything like that, social media. I'm sure they're on YouTube as well, um, but there are a lot of them out there with
Yeah,
regular posting, and that's just it's a whole other world of
yeah,
free advice. Maybe let's put it that
yeah.
way.
I'm gonna need to find my way through that because right now it's either like clips of Ismo doing his comedy, or there seem to be a number of women that oftentimes partially clad
Oh,
that want to
well,
follow me,
you know,
and I haven't quite
well,
figured out
no,
what that's
this is
about yet.
I'll give you a few suggestions. Once you find that, they all will find you. So
Oh yeah, they're there already.
yeah, okay, okay. So
It's really quite frightening, the level of intrusion.
yeah, it is that and that whole the whole thing of living online or whatever. That's a
Yeah.
whole lot. That's we could do that a whole other
Yeah.
thing. But
So I can confer with you on how to zoom in on more appropriate.
yeah, I'll try.
Content.
I follow a lot of artists, we have a lot of art content, but there is a
Yeah.
lot of therapy content, and that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, that is interesting to me, and I just simply did not know that.
Yeah, it's so there's everything out there. Everything is there, bad and good.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to like sort through it. And so, but anyway, let's get back to um, some other things that are more about you. Um, I like this quote. The goal is not to play a perfect game; it is to improve one's batting average. So I thought that was a good way of a good philosophy to have. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, one of the things that I noticed when I was writing the book is that that actually comes up in several places, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean to the point where I had to make sure that I wasn't overdoing it with the expression. I clearly used it a lot when I was working at the VA because, and I mean, this isn't something that's specific to veterans. It's true for everybody that's seeking change and trying to muster the courage to do it. Um, that the expectations that you set for yourself, especially initially, can be putting the bar way too high. And I just liked the metaphor. I mean, I realize that it's kind of a male-dominated metaphor, but
Oh, women play
well,
sports.
that's right. That's right. They
I
do.
love baseball.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
th-
We're good.
Yeah. I mean, it may be what I was thinking of at the time, but that's on me. Um, I I mean, I think it speaks for itself, and um, I really believe that sometimes we think that the changes that we're going to be able to affect are going to be um, all or none,
Mm-hmm.
that
That's
we're
right.
over the line or we're not. And I think in the context that it's talked about in the book, which is largely around issues of anger and um, being able to deal with hurt and wounds and anger and so on, um, you're not. Well, let me say it personally. I've not been able to play a perfect game. I mean, under the right circumstances, you get tested, and um, that takes you to a different level of intervention at that point. Like when you realize you're starting to go in that direction, can you simply control your impulse to rage or whatever so that you can choose um, healthier, less destructive alternatives? You might have been able to do even better than that in some circumstances, but is it okay for me to mention a corporate name or should I stay
Anything.
away from that?
Sure. No, we're
All you have to do, all you have to do is try to cancel something that you have with AT&T and call them up and they are much, much better at not giving you what you want and trying to divert you to something else, including just staying with what you've had, or even to upsell you under those circumstances.
That's right.
Than you are at being able to sort of throw the cross and the garlic at them.
Yeah.
It for any human being, it's really maddening.
Yeah, I think we've all had that experience of yelling into the phone. I think I've been here like I've been, because you get in the loops
Yeah,
of the robotic loops,
yeah,
and I have been here. I've had different issues with a different company, and just like yelling representative, representative until I'm just screaming into the void.
right.
And at some point, sometimes it actually works, and I get a person. But
Yeah, well, at least you're yelling at a machine at that point in
yeah,
time. So I don't, I mean, in this age of AI, who knows, that could wind up in the
sure,
news or something.
sure.
Angry customer assaults computer,
Well, we're going to take a little break and come back.
Hey, don't forget that Steve Davis and Lorrie Lane have a wonderful exhibition in Low Mill in Huntsville until July 12th, I believe. It's on the third floor gallery and it's a sight to behold. So if you're in Huntsville, check out Low Mill. Thanks.
Well, welcome back. if you're just joining us, which you probably aren't because I know you're sitting here the entire time listening to everything that we say, which I really appreciate. We're here with Sam Popkin, and we're talking about his books, Seen Through the Narrow Window. And again, we'll have the link on our YouTube channel in the comments to be, to see, so you can purchase the book. But we've been having a really interesting discussion. So one of the things I thought was interesting was you're talking about religion, and so I thought there were some big changes. So do you want to say anything about how you started off Jewish and you became a Christian, and now are you a Jungian now?
No.
That's not a religion, I know, but I thought it was now a little more uncertainty, I guess, put it that
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to put the cart before the horse because those that have not read Scene 3, I believe,
way.
um, are not necessarily going to know what the logic flow is to my saying this. But where I am right now is I'm um, very, I want to get the right word here. I'm sorry. Take a moment. I'm very uncertain about where I belong in the population of organized religious experiences.
Okay.
And I don't say that, and I hope that I don't convey this in what I've written with any disrespect
No, it
for,
does not come
for,
across
well,
disrespectful.
that's reassuring. Thank
Mhm.
you, because it was not my intention. But I felt that the story had to be told, and if anything took courage in the writing of this book, it was Scene 3,
Mhm.
especially because I have people that are still living that are likely to be affected by it.
Mhm.
Um, and some of whom are actually people that know me pretty well and are close to me, and others are like high school acquaintances that feel very strongly, for example, about Judaism as a faith
Mhm.
and are very likely to be offended if somebody strays
Mhm.
from that quote unquote inherited belief system
Mhm.
and cultural identity. But in a nutshell, um, the story is that I was born into a Jewish family. Um, I went through all of the basic Jewish rites of passages. Um, and for some reason, I never really felt particularly um, called to and immersed in the Jewish faith. And I feel badly for even saying that because, and I suspect that people that have non-normative identities and interests in this world feel the same way,
Mhm.
that they recognize that it's not doing it for them in some fashion. It's
Mhm.
not what turns them on. And you invariably, especially the younger you are, I think, wonder what the hell's wrong with me. Why am I like this? There must be something defective about me that I'm not with the program. So I mean, I even can feel the sadness that wells up in me to just be able to say this is how it was. And I went along for the ride largely because um, my parents were clearly in the camp
Sure.
and were going to be. And it didn't take a genius to know that saying something like, I really would like to go to somebody's church and just see what it's like or whatever, because I don't know why I walk by those big buildings with the spires on them right down our street in Swampscott and feel afraid, like something's going on here that's terribly scary, you know. Um, but they were, as I mentioned in the book, and I talk about in a little bit of detail, there were a series of sort of cardinal events in my life where I was um, exposed to running into people and places and so on that were enticements, I think, to my growing interest in what Christianity might be all about. And of course, the critical incident for me is where the chapter or the scene starts,
Yes.
where I had a sleepover at a friend's house, and we woke up one morning, and the sky was beautiful, and you could really just see it through the skylight. It's not like you had a big picture window.
Mhm.
Um, but we're looking out the sky, which is just kind of like a little bit ethereal in its own right. And we literally, I'm not exaggerating, we did not speak to each other. He just turned to me. We both just felt this bliss. Um, and he said to me, and I believe he was Catholic. He said, "This is what it's like in heaven."
Wow. Yeah.
And I thought, these people are onto something. So I went home and I asked my dad, I think a very legitimate question. I said, "Do Jews believe in heaven?" Because I wanted to believe that they did, and I had not been taught anything about this.
Mhm.
And his answer was very strong. Um, and even at that age, one listens well. And he was kind of angry. Now, it may not have been angry at me. Maybe he didn't like his answer for
Sure.
himself,
Sure.
But he just said, I mean, I'll never forget it. He said, "No, when you die, you go into the ground." And that didn't make anything any better for me at that point in my understanding, especially having had that kind of like, semi-spiritual experience at the sleepover. And then after that, there were all these encounters. So what my mental life was like was increasing interest in the people I was running into that were telling me Christian things, but increasing obedience to the dictates of the faith that I was born into. So I did all of it. I was always a pretty respectful kid.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until decades later that circumstances, uh, what shall we say, coalesced, collided
Mhm.
in such a way that um, I had a kind of desperate opportunity to um, get baptized into the Episcopal faith,
Sure.
and I did it.
Mhm.
But like I think it says in the book, it took like 30 years
But I mean,
of
yeah. What
anxious avoidance to
it
do it.
wasn't rash. Yeah, it was not a quick
No,
decision.
I mean I don't know if I could say in retrospect that it was well thought out, but
Yeah.
I believe there was a purpose
And
in how it played out.
and then you quote a lot from M. Scott Peck.
I'm sure I do.
Yes, and so and he was a Christian, or is he still alive? I don't know.
No,
No.
he's been gone for years now,
Okay, yeah, that's what
actually,
I thought. Okay,
unfortunately.
yeah. So, but I wondered if just being influenced by him and that as a Christian psychologist, did that have anything, or was
Oh,
that
unquestionably.
okay?
I only met him in person once, and that wasn't like um, he was much more attending to ways to keep people off of him than to bring them towards him. So it
Sure,
wasn't like a super gratifying
right.
experience, but I wasn't expecting that. All I really wanted to do was be in the same room with the guy
Okay.
and get a look at him,
Uh-huh.
and he was kind of distant and dour actually in his
Hmm.
own way.
Hmm.
But read his writing and you get an entirely different feeling tone. And I was quite aware when I was reading his books in days gone by that I felt like I was reading the work of the father I would have really liked to have had.
Oh wow. Okay, so that makes a big impact.
I think a lot of people that read authors that they can relate to it that strongly would probably say the same thing.
Hmm.
Maybe not a parent,
But it's someone in
but
their
a brother
family.
or an uncle or a teacher
Hmm.
or a religious leader.
Just and maybe we're always trying to make, and as you talk a lot about community too, like an
Yeah,
ideal community, like you have to, it's almost like recreating a family maybe you didn't have, or extending that idea into a place of
yeah,
acceptance
yeah.
of
That's
who we are.
yeah. There's an awful lot of work in the field about in the field of family dynamics, family therapy, and systems therapy, and stuff that discusses what our urges might be to try to right wrongs that we've experienced in the past by um, what we choose.
Hmm.
and others, of course, argue the converse, that we try to just recapitulate, but then
We just,
reinvent them one way or another. And
yeah.
marriage is a perfect example of that, where you find yourself marrying into the same dynamic over and over again,
Uh-huh.
and wondering why nothing's getting better.
Yeah, so there is a lot of popular talk about cycles and cycle breakers,
Yeah,
and so I guess that's part of it
yeah.
as well.
Can I say one other thing
Please
about this,
do.
though, just for the purpose
Yeah.
of bringing it to a little closure and trying to entice people to maybe read on further with this? The most important part of that scene to me is actually the section where I talk about what I've been thinking about since I left the
Mhm,
church.
mhm,
And it's the point in the scene where I mentioned that I've gotten really hung up on an idea that I had one day, that the song "Me and Bobby McGee,"
mhm.
that was made so famous by Janis Joplin, has a lyric in it that probably could have been modified from "Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose" to "Freedom's just another word for nothing left to prove." And that has become wildly important to me in terms of the implications of it. I think it can take your thinking and your spirit a long way.
Well, you also say the best revenge is growing up. So is that part of that, where you are, if once you grow up enough, you don't have anything left to
Yeah, I mean,
prove.
that's the first time that's come to my attention, but I think that's spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That
that's
you
really smart.
you are finally there. Um, so
Yeah, it
uh,
does relate to freedom, doesn't it?
it does. It
Yeah.
does. It is, and that's where, again, I think we've been exploring this as you live long enough, and you have this different perspective, and it can be very freeing. I mean, it's and I see that's with my art as well. Like, I don't really have to prove anything to anyone. I can just do what I want,
Right,
and that is, it's a different feeling.
right.
Yeah. So I'm trying to impart this to my younger friend, my younger art friends, and my kids. Go ahead, just do it. We do a lot of that. And I'm like, start before I did. Like, if I
Yeah,
could pass anything on to them, it's just like, go ahead and do that now. You don't have to wait.
yeah. Well, and the beauty is that you don't have to do any one of these pieces in here over again.
Oh, I end up having to, but
Oh, do you really?
well, sometimes you get commissions. I mean, it's okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, money's still a part of this, but
Yeah,
I mean, but that's all right. I don't have to, but I'm not copying someone else. So
right.
that
No, thank
that,
you for grounding me with that. That's
but
important to
but
know.
that's right.
We're all learning.
That's 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 true. Um, and maybe just along the same lines, there is a scene in there about that house fire that you were in,
Yeah.
and you felt like you were, and I won't give too much away, but you felt like you were rescued by a voice.
Hmm.
Um, and so, do you feel like maybe there's part of you that's kind of a mystic?
The thoughts never crossed my mind. Um,
But I mean, even like the bliss that you felt, some of the things, they sound almost like, I think you respond to some kind of mystical something. Am I
well,
reading
it's
too
a
much into it?
no, no. It's not even so much that, but I mean, it's the risk of you know delving into a self-analysis on it. What I'm realizing as you're saying that is that, and of course, I'll have to give this more thought after the show and for the rest of my life. Um, I
That's what we
think
want. We want to
my,
hear.
That's right.
I
Yeah.
mean, my tendency is to see the salvation, so to speak, as being external to me.
Okay.
The voice from somewhere
Well,
deep in my ear,
yeah.
not my voice necessarily, but some voice. Um, and what was the other? The
The bliss
The
from your
bliss that
heart.
you felt.
Yeah, that I think of that as kind of like a gift, that was something that was given to me as opposed to something that I generated.
Right, right.
So that may be telling.
Yes, I think
If I
that,
were my own client, I would be pointing that out, and
okay,
we'd be exploring that a little bit.
okay. And I feel like maybe in like a therapeutic practice, uh, understanding there might be more to life than what we can see is hopeful for some people.
Oh yeah,
Hmm.
and I think I do think, and this may just be a big projection on my part of my own personality, but I think that people oftentimes really struggle with giving themselves credit for gifts that they have and 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 claiming them as their own. I know that I'm one of those people, and I can actually tell you part of where that comes from. If I ever in childhood did something where I was probably being perceived as being, cocky
Hmm.
or arrogant
Hmm.
or haughty or something like that,
Hmm.
I would literally be told by my father, "Get off your high horse."
Hmm. Do
That
you
sends a real strong
do
message
you
to
think
a
he was
kid.
being protective in a weird way,
Um,
or was he competitive? If he had,
you know something? I think that if anything, he probably was envious, but wasn't able to cop to that, so he went with the anger.
okay,
You
yeah.
know, um, that it was easier to be angry at something that you were seeing manifest that you wish was something that you would
Hmm.
come up with.
Were you very different as a father to your kids?
I tried to be.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't always succeed, but especially around anger. But
Hmm.
I tried to be. The interesting thing is, and I don't want to be too public about this, but um, my children's personalities are very different from mine, and so that's created a, at times a real orthogonal connection, you might say.
Okay.
Um, a lack of blending, such that somebody comes to me and says, "Dad, what do you think about this?" Or "I saw what you wrote and I thought that was great." Or, now my daughter, when she was very, very young, was bragging about me to a friend, and she said, "My dad has the bestest job." And I'll never forget it because it was really one of the sweetest things I ever heard her say. But it wasn't, you know, it, it wasn't they weren't relationships of great warmth,
Okay.
beyond the instrumentals of taking care of your
Okay.
children.
Well, that can happen.
Yeah.
Um.
Sorry to say that, and I'm sorry to anybody that's heard it,
Well,
but
that's
it's
it's all right to
true
be
as
on. It's all right to be honest.
true as true.
Sure.
Yeah, and they won't listen to the show. So.
Well, if they do, the other quote, we're going on to something a little bit different, but
Okay.
is, and I love this, was "I'm not a hypochondriac anymore. Everything I have is real."
Hmm.
That is hilarious. And
And
also,
that's why I used it, because
and
I said that to somebody
yeah,
once, and he thought it was hysterical.
but it's funny because it's true. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that, but I just we know what we mean, old people. If you're young, just wait.
Yeah, this may seem like a bit of a loose association, but I don't think it is. Um, I was
We're all
originally.
about loose associations.
Oh,
That's
are
all right.
you?
Yeah,
Oh, then I've
yeah,
come to the right
yeah,
place.
yeah.
Good. Um, I had a section that I had written, and I don't know if it was really even a scene at that point in
Hmm.
time, but I wanted to write a section that was called "The Nicest Things That Have Ever Been Said About Me," and I had several that I wanted to mention, and they all have meaning to me. Um, I decided to leave it out, and I think it was probably a good idea because I started thinking to myself, that's kind of like something that they had on Seinfeld, where they said this list is just a bunch of things in your closet. I don't know if you remember that. It
Oh
has
yes.
no bearing on your qualifications. Um, but one of the things that was in there was a recommendation for my postdoc from my graduate school mentor in geropsychology, who described my sense of humor for that reader. And I thought when I read it, because she gave me the letter, I thought this is the most accurate depiction, the kindest, most considerate way anybody's ever thought about my sense of humor. And now I bring it full circle. She said, his humor is such that he gives power, he gives voice to his great powers of observation by being able to get to the heart of the matter at hand.
Okay. Well, which is a good way of,
And I think that's
Yeah.
what the hypochondria thing is, I think is an example of that. It's funny, and it's true.
yeah, and it's true. It definitely is.
Yeah. I mean, it tells you the difference between what it used to be like and where it is now. It's much better to have real stuff.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, you the old joke about the tombstone that says, "I told you I was sick." So-
Yeah, that had been suggested to me at various points along the way.
Well, we are almost done with our interview, but I have one more question. Speaking of Seinfeld, does everyone ever think that you're Larry David?
Yes. Um,
And should you go ahead with it? Should you go along with it?
yeah, I mean, if there are two, I don't think of him as a doppelganger, quite frankly, any more than I think of, who's the politician from New Hampshire? Blocking on his name right now.
You mean Vermont?
Vermont.
You mean Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, I get Bernie Sanders a lot too.
You could do a Bernie Sanders with a little
Yeah.
more flailing of arms.
Probably better than I could do Larry David. But the particularly interesting thing is that when I bought my first Prius and I was driving around Birmingham, I would get comments here and there that I looked just like a little Larry David driving around. And then the other one, the Bernie Sanders thing, was I was driving through Walgreens, I think in Homewood when I was living up there. Driving through their drug pickup window. The guy opens the window and he says, "You've been doing really great in the polls lately." And
you should have said, yeah, I'm going after the 1%.
I told that story at a concert that I played at. I played keyboards and was in a Beatles band. And
okay, we didn't even know that part.
My punchline was, so I just grabbed my bag of Viagra and got the hell out of there.
Well, that is wonderful. So, all right.
Yeah,
well,
I admit it. It's true.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
And thanks for being here. I think this was a really fun interview. And again, everyone go out and get the book. How do we end this? Oh, I've got to watch my shows, Sheryl.
That's right. Everybody back to work.
Thank you. Cut.
All right.